And we are live. Welcome to another episode of the Carnivore Evolution podcast. Michelle, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on.
Amazing. I've been looking forward to getting you on for a long time now. I've been watching, I've heard your story so many times on different podcasts with Ken Berry and stuff like that. And I want to talk about your story shortly, but give me some backstory on you first.
Yeah, absolutely. So, briefly, my health journey began when I was 12. I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa. I was 5 feet tall, about 57 and a half pounds, very underweight, immediately put into inpatient treatment for 2 months, put on a 24-hour tube feeding system. And even as a 12-year-old, I was told that people don't really recover from eating disorders.
Mhm,
You can get weight
mhm,
restored, but this is a lifelong disorder. This is something you'll deal with your whole life, which was pretty terrifying. And now as an adult, I'm so grateful I did become weight restored. But the statistics for eating disorders, both anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder, are pretty grim. People end up either back in treatment, relapsing, often spending their whole life in and out of hospitalization. Anorexia has one of the highest mortality rates of any psychiatric disorder, and even sadder than people, potentially dying from complications of being very underweight. About 10 to 20% of people with anorexia will take their own life, which,
mhm.
having been through that, I can definitely empathize. It's a scary, hopeless place to be. But fast forward, so, became weight restored following the standard American diet, but I dealt with chronic anxiety, depression. I did relapse a few times where I lost quite a bit of weight. I decided I wanted to become a dietitian. My two oldest sisters went into medicine. They both became MDs. And I didn't really want to go that route. I had this intuition that food was powerful, right? Like I'd seen food take me from being very underweight to a much more stable weight. But I thought, like, maybe there's something I'm missing. Is there a way that I can eat that can calm my anxiety? Because it
Mhm.
seemed like a lot of other people that I would interact with didn't seem to be constantly thinking about food, ruminating about food, anxious about what they're going to eat, when, where, why. And, as I've shared before, when I went to the dietetic internship, there were just so many things that didn't make sense. And I think this is a problem in the United States. I'm guessing it's a problem worldwide where we've stopped critical thinking. We've stopped asking questions. We just kind of assume that whatever we're being told is correct. For example, I went in the room with someone with type 2 diabetes, and my preceptor would say, okay, their blood glucose is high. So we're
Mhm.
going to teach them how to eat carbohydrates consistently so we can dose them with insulin consistently to
Yeah.
manage their blood glucose. And as a student, I just said, oh, if their blood glucose is high and carbohydrates cause their blood glucose to go up, should we teach them to eat less carbohydrates?
Mhm.
And it was like, no, of course not. Like, that's the foundation of human nutrition. I was kind of pegged as this difficult dietetics student because, next week our rotation's in the ICU. And I remember flipping over the tube feeding ingredients. You're put on a tube feeding system, very common in eating disorder treatment if you're underweight. Also, if you're in the hospital and you can't eat, you get a nasogastric tube. And the ingredients were just, I remember looking at it as a 24-year-old in an internship, and I was like, oh my God, this is what I was fed when I was 12, maltodextrin, soy protein, canola oil. And here I am 24, and it's the same thing. I'm 42 now. Guess what?
Mhm.
It's the same thing. And I would
Mhm.
just ask questions. I would just say, hey, is this the best way to feed somebody who's been in a traumatic car accident, who's trying to regain weight? And I was told, like, look, it doesn't matter. It's just protein and calories. And so, yeah, and that's kind of how I led. Became a dietitian. I practiced, I taught what I was taught, and it just seemed like my patients weren't getting better. People would come into acute care and they'd have elevated blood glucose, and pretty soon they're needing an amputation. They've got infections. They're going to kidney failure. But you're just so overwhelmed. Our healthcare system in the States is just, you have so many patients, you have so little time, and you're just basically kind of like this cog in a wheel. But it wasn't really until I had my own health crisis in 2019 that I really dug into the research. And I think that's my advocacy now, is everybody has to do their own research. You are not going to get this probably from most doctors, most dietitians, and the rest is history. So yeah, that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. 'Cause I just mentioned this to you before we came on. Your story is very, very similar to mine because I was the same. I was diagnosed when I was anorexic when I was 14 years of age, and I kind of fell into it by accident. I had no idea what an eating disorder was. I just took I just I was brought up, I was overweight. I didn't like the way I looked, and I always said, right, I need to change something here. So I just went on the standard diet, lowered my food, did a lot of training, and I just got addictive. And then it just took over my life. It became a disorder. And then I lost so much weight to the point when I was 14, I was around 15 years of age, and I was under like 50 pounds. I was very, very light. Um, and I would have continued doing what I was doing until I was on a family holiday and I just fainted. My body had nothing left, nothing left. And I was told when I collapsed, I was gone for 5 minutes. My heart had stopped for 5 minutes. And that's when they brought me into the hospital. You're diagnosed. Your son has an eating disorder. He's dealing with anorexia. But I like the way you mentioned that our system hasn't changed because back then I didn't want to eat. I had this massive fear of food. Like you put food in front of me, I wouldn't have had it, and I'm sure you would have been the same. So to get past that was incredible. But when you finally said, okay, I need to accept this, I need to look after myself. What should I do? I go by what these people tell me. So these people were giving me the weight gainer shakes, the protein bars, jelly and ice cream. Just the food was absolutely horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. That was my therapy. Now I did put on weight, but I, like you, I suffered with my mental health for a very, very long time. And I came out of that. Yes, I thought I looked healthy, but the one thing that always got to me was mental health. I was like, okay, I don't feel good here. I don't feel good at all here. Why is this not working for me? And I was like, did I do a lot of damage to myself? Was this because I went through an eating disorder? And when we currently look at what's going on in the world at the moment, I I class pretty much what everybody's doing at the moment, doing low calorie diets. That's the sign to me that's an eating disorder because you're only focusing on like one specific goal. You're thinking about food all the time. You're thinking about your addiction. So when I hear people saying how when they talk about the carnivore lifestyle and they're talking about, okay, this is going to lead to an eating disorder. For me, an eating disorder is when you have an addiction. You're thinking about food all the time. Whereas with carnivore, that got me out of that. Was that similar to you?
Yeah, so when I kind of how I came to the carnivore diet and into more of a ketogenic diet is I became an athlete after I was well and weight restored. And it just kind of felt like my running performance. I was training for marathons, fell off a cliff. And, at that time I was eating 400, 500 grams of carbohydrates a day, very low fats. I mean, I ate protein, but pretty lean proteins. And I was 36 and I just was getting cold sweats. My body hurt. My mental, my mental health was never great, but it got worse, panic attacks, periods of just severe anxiety, suicidal ideation. And, I just decided, I just kind of had this come to Jesus moment, like, I'm done with this. I'm over
Mm,
this. And that's when I started to research low carb diet. Like if I'm not going to exercise, I should probably reduce my carbohydrates. And I stumbled on ketogenic diets, and then that led me to carnivore diets. And I remember thinking, like, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard. Like, I'm from the South in the States, are very big meat producing. So I liked meat. But I thought, like, this can't be healthy. This can't be good for
mm,
me. But what I knew was I wasn't healthy then, right? I knew my metabolism was a mess. My mind was a mess. And the more research I did on ketogenic diets, honestly, I became angry because I was like,
mm,
nobody taught me this in dietetics.
mm,
It was readily available. All these studies on
mm.
reversing. I mean, Dr. Westman showed they got somebody off 150 units of insulin in 8 days. I had patients that were type 2 diabetes for 30 years. And I'm like, 8 days? And now, I get to work in type 2 diabetes care. We reverse type 2 diabetes in less than 3 months. I mean, this is a little side note. But yeah, I decided to do the carnivore diet for 30 days just to see. And of course, my wife, we argued about it. Oh, this is eating disorder. This is only going to set you back. But it completely changed my mental health. Like to the point where she was like, this is the best your anxiety has been in the 11 years that I've known you. I wasn't hungry. And from what I understand now and from what I've had to go and study is we stabilize blood glucose. We got insulin down. My brain, a lot of people with mental health disorders, there's a hypothesis that Dr. Chris Palmer talks about that the brain, we just don't metabolize glucose very well in the brain. Why is that? I don't know. Honestly, I don't really care. But they've shown people with schizophrenia, people with bipolar disorder, it's kind of like epilepsy. Babies didn't do anything wrong. They just have a genetic abnormality in the brain where they don't utilize glucose very well. And so when they're put on low carb or ketogenic diets, instead of the brain being fueled with glucose, it's now fueled with ketones and free fatty acids. They stop having seizures. And for a lot of people with severe anxiety, depression, and other issues, the brain works better on ketones and free fatty acids. And so I just found this incredible calm, on this way of eating. And, since this was 2019, and of course it evolves, and that's something we can certainly talk about. There's a small group of people that think that once you're ketogenic or carnivore, you have to be that way forever. And, my theory and hypothesis, like once your metabolism heals and you're great, you can eat carbohydrates, depending on your health and your metabolic goals. Like the goal isn't to be carnivore, your whole life. The goal is to stabilize metabolic health, to have excellent mental health, to have vibrant physical health. But to call a way of eating disordered when it's actually serving your health, I think is kind of silly.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. Like at the end of the day, you have to go off how you feel. But I think we need to understand that there's a big difference between health and looking a certain way. And this is where the confusion is, that when we look at carbohydrates, no matter what you're doing, they're never going to be essential in the diet at all. At all. Like from a health standpoint, we know that carbohydrates are not essential. They're not an essential macronutrient. We know we can thrive a lot better on ketones. Your brain can actually produce its own glucose through gluconeogenesis. So we need to understand that, if you want to add carbohydrates in, if you're metabolically flexible, that's fine. That's absolutely no problem at all. The issue I have is if it works for you, that's absolutely fantastic. But if you're telling the world that this is what we need to do, that's where I have the issue.
Yeah, I get what you're saying 100%. Because I think right now, in the United States, 93% of us are metabolically unhealthy, right? Meaning that they have elevated blood glucose, obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease. And what I work with a company called Ona Health with Dr. Mariella Glantz. And what we've seen over and over is when people adopt these, animal protein based, high fat, high to moderate fat, right? They use some starchy or non-starchy vegetables, very low carbohydrate diets. They're able to lose weight. They're able to improve mental health, metabolic health. And so that is, in my opinion, the foundation of human nutrition really is animal meat and fat. And then, carbohydrates should be used in accordance to like your goals and your tolerance. Like obviously how I eat as somebody who trains for, trying to think of how would you do this in kilometers. So 50-mile races. So a lot, 80 kilometers-esque. I apologize for not having the conversion in my head. Is going to be very different than somebody who is 400 pounds and has a high A1C.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So because gluconeogenesis is likely not going to be able to completely replenish my glycogen stores, but that's a very one-off rare case, right? Yeah. So what I found is that, if we can just get people stabilizing blood glucose, eating protein, that is one thing. It's very interesting. A lot of the type 2 diabetics that I see when we look at labs, very easy to see A1C and blood glucose is elevated. That often is not surprising. But what is interesting, and what I pointed out in our last team meeting, is blood urea nitrogen in a lot of these patients is very low. And what is blood urea nitrogen, right? It's a measure of your kidney function, but the only macronutrient that has nitrogen is protein. So often these people are way under proteined and way over carbohydrate. And so the goal, once again, can we flip that? Can we get you eating protein is incredibly satiating. My 6-year-old niece can actually look at a graph too. Like if you just look at a graph that shows what do these macronutrients do to blood glucose and insulin, fat is almost negligible. And I don't know if this is just podcast, you guys can't see me. So it's just almost nothing. Protein, you get a very small rise in blood glucose, and carbohydrates is like a mountain. Yeah. And once again, nothing is necessarily good or bad, just depending on the context, but specifically for metabolic illness. And once again, that's more than 9 out of 10 of us have one of these. It makes a lot more sense.
But see, that's what I just don't get at the moment, because we're seeing now carnivores going back to adding more carbohydrates in their diet because they're focusing on the A1C. They're like, oh my God, my A1C is high. But at the end of the day, should you not be going off how you feel? Like if I asked you the question that, how do you feel? And you turn around and say to me, I feel fantastic. I feel absolutely amazing. Then like, what's the problem here? Now, if you have a
little bit of context there. It depends.
But if you are on the standard diet, like the standard American diet and you have an A1C and it's really, really high, I'm pretty sure you're going to feel a different way.
You know what's wild is not necessarily, you know, a lot of people with severe type 2 diabetes, like they're so used to just kind of the standard filling of crap. They can't even tell you when their blood glucose is 150 or 400, you know? And I would just say, like, it's, you know, I often tell the young ladies I'm working with anorexia, like, there's no sign of your bones breaking. Like, you literally can just be going along, you're thinking everything's fine, I'm doing fine, and then crack. And you have osteoporosis. You don't have osteopenia. You are literally have the bones of a 70-year-old. So I don't know if we can always trust how we feel, you know, and that's not to say, obviously, when you feel much better physically and mentally, that's not something to look into, but I think it's wise to, you know, keep an eye, you know, if you notice, like, man, my thyroid labs are really bad. I have people come to me with elevated LDL, and, you know, I've obviously, LDL is so context dependent. I'm not necessarily worried about elevated LDL as long as your blood glucose is low. But then you may have some other labs. You may have a huge family history, and there's a difference between an LDL of 200 and an LDL of, like, I've seen 700. Like, so I do think it depends, you know, and that's why I'm not a kind of a one size, you know.
Well, I'm seeing that at the moment with clients. At the moment, they've been doing carnivore for just over a year, and then they're reaching a stall. Nothing's working anymore. And this is when I say, okay, I need to have a look at blood work. Now, it's very, very interesting. When I have a look at their blood work, their triglycerides are very, very high. So it's usually over 100. So I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, well, hang on a second. How come these numbers are really, really high? If you're just eating protein and just eating fat, and they're not losing any more weight at this stage. This is usually around 4 to 6 months into the diet. So I'm looking at it and I'm saying, okay, what's going on here? Surely the 2 macros that I have you on, that's pretty much all you need. Now, I'm never going to add more carbohydrates into the diet because I don't think you need carbohydrates in the diet in the first place. So what I do is I go against what the majority say when you go on a carnivore diet. Just go on a high-fat diet, you're going to lose weight. But I don't see that. I see from a body composition, you still need to track. You still need to make sure you're tracking your macros, because this is the information you get in the carnivore community, that you can just eat as much as you want. You can eat as much fat as you want. You can eat as much protein you want, and you will automatically lose weight. Now, you might do that at the very, very beginning because your body's going through this healing process, but there will become a time when things are not moving anymore. There might be a food that you're eating that's not working in your system anymore. Like dairy is a big one. A lot of people can tolerate dairy at the very, very beginning, but then during the process, they get intolerant to it. You know what I mean? Eggs is another one as well. It's usually the egg whites. So what I'm saying is that if you're on a carnivore diet and things are not working, should we be going back to carbohydrates? Or should we be looking at, okay, you're on the carnivore diet, maybe there's a few things that we need to tweak there. Regardless whether your A1C is up or you're fasting insulin or anything like that, should we be adding more carbohydrates into the diet, or should we just stick to what we're doing at the moment?
And you know what we've seen? We're actually talking with Dr. Robert Cywus about this. So we've seen, like, very, very long term where people are getting 0 carbohydrates is, you know, what he calls insulin suppression. Almost looks like type 1 diabetics, where, you know, people have this elevated A1C even though they're not eating, because they're just not able to utilize, they're not getting any insulin, you know, because insulin is a very powerful hormone that helps actually get blood glucose back into the bloodstream, and they become so fat adapted, which is a really good thing. But once again, the goal isn't to just be fat adapted. The goal is to be metabolically flexible. And so he's seen people do as little as, you know, there was a study he referenced that had 40 grams of carbs, but he said he's seen people do as little as 20 to 25, and actually that's helped bring blood glucose down. So I don't think that's a bad idea at all. That's super easy. I mean, you can do that with non-starchy vegetables, you know, or a handful of berries or something like that. So I think that's an easy opportunity. I definitely think I agree with you that people sometimes will take carnivore and just eat massive amounts of fat. If your goal is to lose fat, you certainly want to burn your own body fat versus just, and it's easy to overeat butter. It's easy to overeat cheese. And so, yeah, I mean, I do think if you have elevated triglycerides and if you have elevated, A1C and you're doing just meat and fat, like, why not explore something like, you know, I said, just adding a handful of carbohydrates back in? Because as much as I love the carnivore diet, just like we have very good evidence that throughout history nobody was vegan, we also have very good evidence that people were also not, you know, pure carnivores. as meaning they had tree bark and grasses and some roots and other things. So I think we have to be careful not to be completely dogmatic in one area or the other.
And can I just ask a question? What's your opinion on having blood work done if you're a fully carnivore?
I think everybody should have blood work done at least every
So even
year.
though you're a carnivore, yeah, I'd have it done probably once a year, but I wouldn't rely on it. Like I kind of have an idea if I'm healthy. I'm not going to go off numbers. So it might, like when we go back to the cholesterol model, we've been eating fat now for a long, long time. I go in and get my blood work done off the doctor. The first thing he's going to say to me is, Jesus, Mark, your cholesterol is very, very high. But I can turn around and say to him, okay, my cholesterol is high, but look at me. I'm amazed. I feel amazing. Like I'll be 53. I'll be 53 this month. I feel incredible. So, you know what I'm saying here. It's like, okay, well, you're going to push me towards a statin here. You're going to push me to go on a low fat diet. Why would I go on a low fat diet when I feel absolutely incredible? My energy is good. I've no more depression. I've no more anxiety. This is what I struggled with for a very, very long time with my eating disorder. I've been working in the fitness industry for over 30 years. I tried to figure this out since I was 21 years of age. I was like, why am I going through this? Why am I depressed? I should be able to sort this out. I used to teach this to clients. Like, listen, just go to the gym, eat the standard diet, make sure you're eating clean. But when these people used to get back to me and say, Mark, I'm in amazing shape here, but I don't feel good. I hadn't got a clue. Because that's not what I was taught.
100%.
I was only taught, okay, just get these people in shape. That's all I was taught.
No, and I think like what I always ask people, and I think this is very fair to ask, it's always okay to ask your doctors questions. And I would ask, can you show me any evidence of cardiovascular disease with elevated LDL in the absence of elevated blood glucose? Any evidence, and they can do that. They might try to reference the Framingham study, but I don't believe that tracked people, with type 2 diabetes. And I don't think we have very good evidence, but I also think it makes sense to be aware. And on the flip side, though, like here's an example. Somebody I know on a pure carnivore diet sent me their labs, and they are the highest blood urea nitrogen AST LLT I've ever seen in my life. Sent it to 2 people I trust. They both said this person is going into kidney failure. So even though this person told me they felt really well, this is a pretty extreme example, but that's an example of this is clearly not working for this human. And there may be some other things going on, so that's why I think we have to be very careful to be like, it's either all or nothing. Am I concerned that my LDL is high? No. Do I go into my family doctor and she has to tell me we should consider a statin, and I say, thank you very much, I'm shaking my head. That's very different though than when you potentially have something like very serious, like, okay, like your BUN is 120, not even exaggerating here. Like, okay, well I don't care how you feel, your kidneys are shutting. Right? But for the most part, like you're saying, if you're feeling well and you're eating in a way that is serving you, then keep doing it. And if you're, and then if it comes to a point, because most experts, myself, everybody on the American Diabetes Society will tell you, we will agree here in the States that a carnivore diet, ketogenic diet is one of the best diets for metabolic health, like absolutely healing. But once again, we're starting to see these people with pure carnivore diets in the 1, 2, sometimes even longer than that start either having issues with thyroid or elevated A1C. And so in my opinion, it doesn't make sense to keep beating your head against a wall. It may be as simple as eating some carrots or eating something, right? So that's where we don't want to be so dogmatic that we do the opposite extreme. And certainly if your doctor's pointing something out, like, hey, because labs aren't just what you eat. I worked with a gentleman who was a firefighter. He was telling me he's eating a 0 carb diet and he had pre-diabetes. And I was like, I don't believe you. You're lying. He wore a CGM. Yeah. And when the fire alarm would go off, his blood sugar would shoot up. Stress, your body, that fight or flight. So labs are stress. Labs are, what are you coming in contact with as far as air, water, other things. So it's just, we have to be careful not to just put it into just what we eat.
But when you mention pre-diabetes, is it not a case of you're either diabetic or you're not, and there's no such thing as being a pre-diabetic?
Well, I mean, in the States we have 5.7 there's damage occurring when your blood glucose is elevated. That's totally true. We have very good evidence that once you're beyond that specific point, you have damage. But we classify 5.7 to 6.5 A1C as
Right.
pre-diabetic, or I'm 6.4 and then 6.5 on. But honestly, it's pretty rare in our clinic. We see somebody, usually it's 7, 8, 9. I just saw 13.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, that's it.
I was just going to mention though as well that with the Diabetes Association, I want to dive a little bit more into this, because the information that we're getting from social media at the moment is that it has nothing to do with sugar. So when your blood glucose increases, it's all down to insulin resistance. And this is where I think the confusion is. I think people need to understand it's going to lead to insulin resistance eventually, but you need to look at the diagnosis at the very, very beginning. So you need to understand what are we measuring in the blood. That's the key here. And
Yeah,
I think people are so confused by that. I think they're absolutely convinced that it's just down to processed foods, seed oil. It's going to lead to insulin resistance. You're going to be obese. You're going to struggle with your health. Yes, that's going to happen. But what caused that to happen in the first place?
That's the $1 million question, right? What actually causes type 2 diabetes? And just so many other things in life, it's not, it's not just one thing. We know nutrition has the absolute biggest impact. And, people will say oh, fruit causes diabetes or sugar causes diabetes. And we don't necessarily have evidence that that's true. People say, I've never seen somebody eating apples that's gonna cause type 2 diabetes. On the flip side, if one of my patients who's already type 2 diabetic eats an orange, we will see their blood glucose go too high. Once your body can no longer tolerate that blood glucose, your body doesn't care if it's a Snickers bar or if it's an orange, your blood glucose. Well, what actually causes that? And all of our evidence, Dr. Bickman, Dr. Westman, is it is excessive, carbohydrates, and now we're having or seed oil, excessive inflammation, because we've eaten carbohydrates in last 100 years. If you look at a picture in America, people on the beach in the 60s and 70s, everybody's relatively lean. But we didn't used to drink, sugary coffee drinks first thing in the morning, Cheetos for breakfast, these ultra processed foods. So you're combining sugars and seed oils, and it's causing a massive, massive problem. I got to spend 8 weeks in Kenya in 2004. And this population, running with some distance runners, it's a very high carbohydrate diet. Close to 80%. I ate beans and rice. It's your protein for the day was 2 eggs and whatever milk you had in the tea. And when I was there the first time, I was there twice, 2004, even people who didn't run, I saw maybe one person who was overweight in this whole town. And then I went back 10 years later, and lots more westernization, lots more processed foods. Almost everybody was overweight, And so the hypothesis, once again, is the combination of those very dense starches, sugars, fats, all together. So, and then people, once again, when you're eating a lot of that stuff, it tends to crowd out a lot of the protein and the fat. So, because people can eat a relatively high carbohydrate diet and not develop type 2 diabetes if, they're keeping intake relatively low. So, because that's the back and forth, right? If it's just carbohydrates, how come some people eat carbohydrates and don't develop type 2 diabetes? There has to be some type of inflammation. There has to be excess. So exactly what that is, I don't think anybody could say for 100% certain, but I would certainly tell any human, once again, going back to my kind of life motto, is if you want to be a healthy human, you really need to have the foundation of your diet be protein. You need to get lots of good quality protein, and not just for, protein has so many functions in the body, but it also is full of the B vitamins, the iron, the folate. Get enough fat. Just eating protein and just that alone stabilizes blood glucose. You'll feel a lot better.
Yeah. I'm saying this all the time because people are always saying to me, fat is the most important macronutrient, and I'm like, no, it's not. Your protein is the most important nutrient. That's the one you should be focusing on. That's the building block to your body, is making sure your protein numbers are on point. And I think that's what's going on in the world at the moment, that a lot of people, as they get older, their protein numbers go down. And this is where you were talking about osteopenia and osteoporosis as they get older, because their protein numbers are going down, their carbohydrates are going up, their fibers going up. They've been deficient in proper nutrition, and this is where they're struggling. And then they're not giving their brain the ketones it needs. So we see like the likes of type 3 diabetes, dementia. I'm going to be interviewing a guy now very, very soon. Hal, his name is. He's looking after a lot of people in the care home at the moment, and he has pretty much every single one of them on a carnivore diet. Now these people are in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, and they're thriving. Every single one of them. And when you see the standard, like, it's amazing.
A lot of other things.
Yeah, but it's incredible because I lost my parents-in-law there 2 years ago, and when I looked at what they went through in the care home, I watched these people deteriorate in front of me because they were on the medications, the nutrition wasn't very, very good. So you're seeing these people literally evaporate in front of your eyes, and then you look around. People are walking around or they're going around in wheelchairs, walking sticks. They're walking around like zombies, and they're younger than me. Bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah, long-term care. I did a short stint in long-term care, and it's pretty horrific, like you described. Yeah. People, it's very carbohydrate based, and unfortunately, here in the U.S., we have regulations. I was working with a group that they wanted to try a higher protein, lower carb diet, but that you can't get funding, you can't get insurance reimbursement. If you're doing that, like you have to follow the standard of care. Mm-hmm. And so even though we wanted to do that, it like you literally for the state couldn't. And the reason, obviously Hal can do that, and I applaud his work, is because it's all private pay, which is most people are not going to be able to. I can't really imagine. You'll have to ask him. I'll be curious how much a month his thing is. I'm going to guess astronomical. But when you do feed people protein, and you're 100% right. I've seen it throughout my careers. As people get older, they tend to eat less protein, as opposed to having bacon and eggs in the morning or having toast or oatmeal, as opposed to having anything with protein in the afternoon. They might have a little cup of soup, and so it's just, which isn't a problem if you do that once a week, but when that's your every single day. So now you're eating less protein. And as you age, your body required protein synthesis decreases. So you need more protein and higher quality protein and got to move. I cannot tell you, getting people just up in these places is terrible. And so even before I was a low carb keto advocate, people would ask me, what's your biggest nutrition advice? I was like, do not stop moving. Do not stop lifting your groceries. Do not stop picking up your pets. Do not stop going for walks. Do not stop squatting, because like you said, people, unfortunately, as you get older, if you don't, the consequences are scary.
Yeah, because what usually happens is a lot of people just fall into really, really bad habits. So if you're starting off with feeding your body crap, obviously you're not going to feel very, very good. Then if you're adding habits into your life where you're adding in a lot of stress, where you're just sitting around, sitting on your phone all day, watching TV all day, you've got a really, really hectic job, you're going into the gym, you're overtraining, you're in a calorie deficit. This is just adding more stress. This is all going to impact your body eventually. And when we look at what's happening now and what's been spoken about oxidative stress and how powerful it is, and it leads to blood sugar elevation, again, we need to understand where's the root cause in the first place. How does it start? How does it start getting chronic? Because we know when it comes to stress in general is not too bad. Cortisol is not too bad. It's only when it becomes chronic that's the problem. And when we look at what's going on in the world at the moment, so many people have stress in their life. It's not just going into the gym and doing an hour and a half workout or doing like a cardio session for like 90 minutes. No, you have to factor in lifestyle, family. Again, what are you doing? Are you moving around? Are you sitting on your phone all day? Because I say this to clients all the time. Like, what do you do first thing in the morning to the last thing you do at night time? Most people say, I get up in the morning, I just panic, I rush to go to the gym. They're not even relaxed. They're just panicking, rush. So they're stressed straight away. Then they're in the gym. They're doing like an hour and a half cardio session. Stress again. Coming out of that, they're going straight into work. More stress. Coming back, they have to feed the kids, make the dinner. More stress. Probably clean the home. More stress. Then they're sitting home. Then they're sitting down. They're looking at their phone or looking at TV. More stress. So they're not giving their bodies time to relax. So what's happening is their blood sugars are just going in this direction all the time. Now, if you tie that in with a really, really bad diet, then it's not going to work.
Oh yeah, you're talking about the bad diet, and that's what we've created, right? We've
Mm,
we've we've not taught society like how to de-stress or calm down, and we've made it seem like it's kind of one or the other. Because you can simply de-stress in a few minutes,
mm,
breathing, meditating, gratitude. Because yeah, as you're saying this, I'm thinking like, oh, it kind of sounds like my day. But
mm.
I make sure when the first thing I get up, like I'm always thinking about like, what am I grateful for? We have
Yes,
a lot of things going on in the States right now that are, in my opinion, not ideal. But it's like I have a house, I have a partner, I have all these things, and as soon as I'm done running, something I talk about in my book, like I take a few minutes, I pat my dog, I breathe, because there's 2 or 3 minutes it takes to get my heart rate down is will save me a lot, versus just like running in the shower and then going to work,
absolutely.
get
Yeah,
out of that fight or flight,
yeah.
right?
I
Um,
yeah, I'm the very, very same. Like I wake up every morning the same at 3:30. Now my gym doesn't open till 5 o'clock. But in that, the reason why I choose to wake up that time because I want to be relaxed. I want to sit on my chair. I want to do a little bit of meditation. I want to focus on my breathing. And then when I'm ready, I want to activate my mindset the right way before I go and go out into the big bad world.
love
Whereas a
it.
lot of people, they just wake up with the alarm. They press snooze alarm and they're not even awake. They're just waking up and it's like panic, 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 panic. You know, that kind of
Well,
way.
like you said,
I,
having a plan, having
yeah.
because all life is or success or failure is like what we do every single day. And the problem with people not sticking to eating or not sticking to moving is you do it once, you don't see any results. You do it twice, you do it 10 times, you don't see result. You can't trust what you see all the time. You
Mm,
have to trust like this is my plan. I'm going to do this consistently because often it takes 30 days, 60 days to really start to see change. And so being committed to something and also just like you said, I tell people get off your phone. Often people will like get really excited. This is what I'm gonna do a plan. Then they'll get online. So and so said this is bad. So and so said this is good. All of the news is just crazy. This and that. It's like take a breath, get off
yeah.
social media, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
not. Who knows? Maybe that's not a great thing to say since I'm on social media. But you know, often, like you said, like having conversations with people, like having call somebody, go say hello, go pet a dog, go for a walk. Like there's so many things we can do to kind of get out of that fight or
Isn't it important that when you're going through a bad time, you just need to take a step back and like what you mentioned, just look at what you have and just be grateful for what you have. That's it.
oh, a million percent.
Just you know what I
Actually
mean?
I had a race that went really crap, like absolutely terrible, a few weeks ago. And as soon as I got back to the hotel, started to feel a little sorry for yourself for a minute. Got on my phone. The first thing I did is I set up 2 volunteer opportunities. I said, I need to get out of my own head
Yeah.
because I am strong. I am grateful. It's not the end of the world. I will learn from it, grow from it, move from it. But we get so caught up and my life is so hard. I would encourage volunteering is a great thing to do in general, but if you're going through it, go volunteer. Go spend a couple hours at a homeless shelter or
Yeah.
with dogs
And
or with old people or something.
I think the key word here is you have control of that situation, believe it or not. You do have control of that situation. You just need to flip it around. Like if you say to yourself when you wake up first thing in the morning, I'm gonna have a really, really bad day today. Why are you gonna have a bad day? Why don't you not just say to yourself, I'm gonna have a really, really good day? It can be
Every day
it
is a
can be
great day.
today's gonna be a fantastic day. You know what I mean?
Well, you're
That
alive, you get to learn, you get to grow.
yeah,
Like, that's my attitude. Like I could spend the rest of my life advocating. It's my gift of gratitude. Like I'm sure it is yours, just to speak out, to give back.
yeah,
And it doesn't mean things aren't hard or challenging, but so what? Like that's life. It's supposed to be hard. You won't grow and learn if things aren't hard and challenging. But I just feel like every opportunity is a good opportunity. And when you look at things through a different lens, because your mind is everything. I've seen people with absolutely nothing. I'm talking like pennies to their name, but it was like, I will figure this out. That absolutely crush it. And I've seen people with more resources than you can imagine that just have decided it's not going to work. And
yeah.
they don't understand why they're miserable and their life's a failure. Like
Mm.
how you think, how you show up, how you decide you're going to be massively. And that doesn't depend on your circumstance. People are like, oh, I ate this crappy meal because my boss was mean. My kid, really? Because your boss was mean, you can't execute? That's ridiculous. You just
But that's
decide.
what I'm saying. But that's what I'm sorry for interrupting. But that's what I'm saying. All that external stuff that goes on in your life, the stuff that's out of your control, like from going to work. There's nothing you can do about that. But the one thing you can control is you can control the variables in your life. Can you move? Yes, you can. Can you put the right food in your body? Yes, you can. Can you sleep better? Yes, you can. Can you stay off your phone as much as possible? Yes, you can.
Yes.
So when you look at what you can control to the stuff that you can't control, you'd be actually very, very surprised that if you focus on this stuff over here, your life is actually going to improve very, very quickly.
Yep, I couldn't have said it better. Like when we take full responsibility for our lives, like everything in your life will change. And it takes
Yeah.
time. That's another people want it like now. Like it's not coming today, tomorrow, next week. It might take months or even a few years, but it will come when you decide like this is my responsibility. My health, my relationship, my finances. And it doesn't matter, terrible things happen. Maybe you've had something horrible happen. We all have. Like get in line,
Yeah,
But when you say like no matter what happens, I will execute and execute. Like you said, that literally means how do I move? How do I show up at my job? How do I show up in my relationships? And how do I eat? And that's it. And like you
100%.
said, put good things in your mind. Like instead of like doom scrolling, go read The Slight Edge by Joel Olson. Go read some type of deep work. Go read a book that's going to help you. So that's and that's just those are just things I've done that have really improved my life.
No, I'm the same. I'm the same. Well, you done a sponsored run there a couple of weeks ago, didn't you? Talk to me about your running at the moment, because that's what you're doing at the moment, aren't you? You're a runner.
Yeah, I'm an ultra runner. So I train for longest race I've done is 100 kilometers,
Wow.
the 50-mile run. But yeah, so my next race, I'm actually doing some shorter stuff. I'm going to do some speed training, 5-kilometer runs for the next couple months. And then I'll be back with the 50-mile run next April. So April 2026. And fingers crossed that goes well. We'll go back up to 100 kilometers. And yeah, I'm just grateful. I love training. It's to me, having a healthy body and, something that I love. I'm just going to do it
Are
as
you, are
long as
you
I can.
are you just doing running, or do you do any weight training or anything like that?
Yeah, right now I do when I'm in my really heavy volume, I do mostly running. But now that it's cut
Mm.
down, I'll do about 2 sessions a week of weight training. Yeah, and mostly just to stay strong, to keep everything because running is just you're just in the sagittal plane, right? You're not really doing any side to side, so mostly just to
Mm.
stay strong and healthy.
Amazing. And what kind of training are you doing? Are you doing like full body? Is it like a bro split? What kind of training are you doing at the moment?
Oh, for weights, yeah. So, yeah, when I'm in my really heavy training, we do like it's usually just like one day a week, pretty full body. And right now, I'll do like just one day upper body and then one day lower body. Um, yeah, and I I don't enjoy it as much, and a lot of people love the gym. I'm much happier out running, but I value it. I know it's good for a million different things. I think resistance training, especially, is as we get older, right? For muscles, for bone density is really important.
Well, and what are you currently eating at the moment, Michelle? Is it strict carnivore, or is there a variety of food in your diet at the moment?
No, I haven't done strict carnivore. I mean, I did that for like a month when I first, started, and then I did more ketogenic. And then now, yeah, as I run, and it just really varies. I would say I'm between, like between 100 and 150 grams of carbohydrates. I'm going to experiment my next training cycle, probably increasing that during those really long runs. But the biggest thing is prioritizing protein, especially post run. It's always a little weird for people that eat beef for breakfast or whatever. But having beef, salmon, gosh, if I'm sometimes when the weather's hot and I'm feeling crappy, I don't love protein shakes, but sometimes that's what you do. Beef, salmon, or whey in the morning, and then kind of similar. We always every evening is pretty similar. Big thing of beef, usually some non-starchy vegetable or carrots, and we do a lot of long fermented sourdough. I do some rice. I do a little bit of fruit. So, it's all just very, I'd say, easy, clean carbohydrates, higher protein, lots of butter, some olive oil.
Mm, mm. And at the end of the day, if it's making you happy, then that's there's no issues there whatsoever.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I feel very fortunate, and if I didn't run, I would probably lean on a little less carbohydrates just because I think that's, once again, best for long-term metabolic health. But I found, just especially as the intensity increases, I feel a little better fueling with a little more carbs.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Michelle, I want to be respectful of your time. Before I let you go, where can people go to find you?
Oh, I appreciate that. So my website, thedietitiansdilemma.net, that has my resources. I have two books, The Dietitian's Dilemma and the children's book, The Fox Family Food Fight. I'm on Instagram at Run, Eat, Meet, Repeat. I'm also on X at Michelle Hurn RD.
Amazing. I'll put all those links below. Honestly, it's been a pleasure meeting you because it just feels like I've been watching you for years because I've been doing
Thank you so
carnivore.
much.
I've been doing carnivore like for 5 years, and it was one of your videos that actually popped up, say 4 years ago, and I watched the first
Oh,
one with what was his name, Ken Berry,
oh
and,
yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah, and when I
Now we're on
heard
the ABS together, so
and
it's
when
crazy how it
when
goes.
I heard your story, I was like, I'd love to meet this woman in person. It's amazing because I've interviewed so many of these people that I've heard in the past. Like I've interviewed Ken Berry, I've seen Sean Baker,
Cool.
I've interviewed Dr. Kills, I've met him a few times. It's just incredible. It's amazing, and I love learning more. The one thing I love
Good.
doing is I love to learn more because I didn't know any of this, say 5 years ago, compared to what I knew when I used to do, when I done my PT and my nutrition course. I want to learn more, so that's why I love talking to the likes of you. I like to learn a little bit more about type 2 diabetes, about a little bit more metabolic health, because I think the more we learn about nutrition, proper nutrition, and I've always said the reason why I'm doing these podcasts is just to spread awareness.
I
Um,
appreciate that, and I agree
so
100%. I feel like I'm still growing, learning, evolving. I always encourage people, but if we can spread the word, because some people, they don't know. They still think eggs and meat are bad for you,
yeah,
and type 2 diabetic should have oatmeal. So all this nonsense. So if we can keep spreading truth, sharing our story, I think that's really powerful.
absolutely amazing. Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, Michelle, it's been an absolute pleasure. I wish you all the best with whatever you do next, and hopefully we'll stay in touch.
Sounds good. Thanks again.
Speak soon.